She pointed right at my cabin and screamed, "That's an illegal build, get him out of here." Snow was still falling when I stepped out, holding my coffee, wondering why 3 HOA board members were standing at the edge of my driveway with a clipboard. The lady in the red parka, Karen, I'd find out later, waved her hand toward the cabin like she was commanding troops. "You can't build here," she barked. "This area's under our homeowners association." I frowned. "Your HOA ends half a mile down that road." She smirked. "Not anymore. We voted to extend the boundary last month, so you'll have to pay the $600 monthly fee and remove that metal roof. It's against HOA aesthetics." I almost laughed. "You extended your boundary onto federal forest land." Her face twitched. "Federal what?" Before I could explain, she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the cops," she said. "You're trespassing on HOA-managed property and that cabin's going to be demolished." 10 minutes later, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up. She ran toward them, yelling, "Arrest him, he's building illegally." The officer looked at me first, then at her. "Ma'am, calm down, what's the issue?" "This man, he's not part of the community, he's stealing our mountain view," she shrieked. I handed the officer a folded document I kept in my jacket, the land deed and coordinates stamped with the U.S. Forest Service emblem. "Sir," I said calmly, "you might want to check your jurisdiction before touching anything here." He unfolded the paper, scanning it slowly while Karen hovered, her arms crossed. "That's fake," she said, laughing nervously. "You can print those online." The officer's expression changed. He looked up at her, then back at the cabin. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "this property isn't under your HOA, it's on federal forest land. You have no authority here." Karen's face went pale. "That's impossible," she whispered. I took a sip of my coffee and said quietly, "You just called the cops on the federal government's land." Her phone slipped from her hand and landed in the snow. And that was the moment everything started unraveling. Karen didn't leave quietly. She stomped her boots through the snow, yelling at the officer that he was being fooled by a squatter. The other 2 HOA board members just stood behind her, red-faced and shivering, clearly wishing they stayed home. The officer sighed and said, "Ma'am, you're about 200 yards inside federal property. You could get fined for trespassing." That's when her tone changed. "Oh, I see what's going on," she sneered. "He bribed you, didn't he? Typical government corruption." I stepped closer. "You're standing on my driveway," I said calmly, "and accusing a deputy of taking bribes. Maybe rethink that." She spun toward me, finger pointed like a dagger. "You think you're smart, huh? You can't just build a cabin and say it's on government land. I'll prove you forged that deed." "Go ahead," I said. "You'll have to call the Forest Service office in Denver. They'll love your story." Her mouth opened, then closed. She glanced around, realizing the officer's dash cam was recording everything. Her voice cracked as she said, "This isn't over." She stormed off, boots crunching in the snow, but I noticed one of the HOA men lingered. He looked at me quietly and muttered, "I told her this wasn't our land, she doesn't listen." Then he jogged after her. That night the mountain went silent again, just me, the cabin, and the wind whistling through the pines. I figured it was over. But 2 days later I woke up to tire tracks on the frozen road and the sound of engines in the distance. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. Down the hill, 6 men in reflective vests were setting up cones and orange tape around the edge of my property. Karen stood behind them, smug as ever, holding a stack of papers. When she saw me, she shouted, "We're here to seize and inspect your illegal structure by HOA order." The wind carried her voice through the trees, and I knew right then she hadn't just crossed a line, she'd dug her own hole. I walked down the slope slowly, boots crunching through the snow, keeping my voice steady. "You're trespassing again," I said. Karen held up her clipboard like it was a weapon. "We have full authorization. This cabin violates multiple HOA codes: unsanctioned build, unapproved color scheme, and improper fencing." I looked at the orange tape fluttering between the trees. "You do realize this isn't an HOA neighborhood, right? That tape marks federal land. You're roping off government property." She smirked. "That's what you say, but I already contacted the county inspector. He's on his way. Once he sees this dump, you'll be fined and forced to remove it." The men behind her looked uneasy, whispering to each other. One finally said, Karen, what if he's right? Those markers look like Forest Service posts. She glared at him, shut up and keep working. Just then, a white pickup pulled up the icy road. The door opened, and out stepped a man in a green jacket with a golden eagle badge on his chest. Karen straightened immediately, brushing snow off her coat. "Finally," she said, waving. "Officer, you're just in time to stop this squatter." The man didn't answer. He looked at the tape, the signs, the vests, then at me. "You the owner here?" he asked. "Yes, sir, got the paperwork if you need it." He nodded, flipping through the deed I handed him. Then he turned toward Karen. "Ma'am, where's your permit to conduct operations on federal forest land?" Her smile vanished. "My permit." "Yes," he said firmly. "You can't organize or execute any inspection or enforcement here without authorization from the U.S. Forest Service." She laughed nervously. "You must be mistaken. This area belongs to the Pine Ridge HOA." He pointed to the carved wooden post beside the road. "That boundary marker says U.S. Department of Agriculture Forest Service. You're standing on federal soil, ma'am." For a moment, all you could hear was the wind. Then one of her hired workers dropped his cone and said, "I'm not getting fined for this," before trudging back to his truck. Karen's face turned red. "No one leaves until I say so," she yelled. The officer tilted his head. "You might want to lower your voice," he said quietly, "because right now you're the one breaking federal law." Her expression froze. And then she made the worst mistake she could have. Karen snatched the papers right out of the officer's hand. "You're all frauds," she screamed. "I know how these scams work: fake badges, fake deeds, fake laws." The officer didn't flinch. He just adjusted his jacket and said calmly, "Ma'am, that's U.S. property you just interfered with. You want to hand those back before things get worse." But Karen wasn't listening. She waved the papers in the air like proof of her authority. "I'm the HOA president. I own this community." I almost felt bad for her, almost. The officer spoke into his radio. "Dispatch, I've got a civilian obstructing a federal officer on site. Send a ranger unit." Her head snapped up. "Oh, what?" "Federal ranger," he said. "They'll explain it better than I can." Her fake bravado cracked. "Wait, no, you can't call more police. We'll handle this privately." She turned to her crew, whispering harshly, "Pack up, we're leaving." But before they could, a dark green SUV with the U.S. Forest Service logo pulled up behind the officer's truck. Two rangers stepped out, both wearing body cams. One of them, a tall woman with mirrored sunglasses, looked straight at Karen. "Ma'am, are you the one who called in the false property claim last week?" Karen froze. "What claim?" The ranger flipped open a folder. "A report filed under your name stated this cabin was built illegally on HOA land. That triggered a federal mapping review, and guess what we found?" She pointed toward my cabin. "It's 100% inside national forest boundaries. You've been harassing a lawful leaseholder on government land." Karen's eyes darted between us. "That can't be right. There's a mistake. There has to be." I stepped closer, voice calm. "No mistake. I've got a 50-year renewable lease from the Forest Service, signed by your county clerk even." Her lips trembled, but she still tried to hold her ground. "You're lying. I'll sue all of you." The ranger took a slow step toward her. "Ma'am, you can do that after we finish processing your citation for trespassing, obstruction, and unauthorized enforcement activity on federal property." Karen's confidence shattered completely. Her phone slipped again, clattering on the frozen road. She looked at me, pure panic in her eyes. I just said quietly, "Next time, make sure your HOA actually owns something before you start shouting orders." The ranger nodded at me with a half smile. "We'll take it from here, sir." But as they walked Karen to the SUV, I noticed her glance back, not angry anymore, but calculating, like she still had something planned. And I was right. That night the storm rolled in hard. The wind howled against the cabin walls and the pines groaned under the weight of fresh snow. I sat by the fire thinking it was finally over. Karen had been escorted off the mountain, fined, and warned never to return without federal permission. But trouble doesn't freeze easily. Just past midnight I heard a low rumble outside, truck engines. Headlights flashed across my window, slicing through the snow. I grabbed my coat and stepped out onto the porch. 3 pickup trucks idled at the bottom of my hill. Their lights glared through the storm and I saw silhouettes moving 6, maybe 7 people. And in the middle of them, unmistakable in her red parka, was Karen. I called out, "You really don't learn, do you?" Her voice cut through the wind. "This is private property now, the county issued a new claim, you've got 10 minutes to pack up before we move in." I couldn't help but laugh. "You forged paperwork again, didn't you?" She crossed her arms. "You'll see, tomorrow this place is gone." I looked closer and realized the men with her weren't county workers, they were contractors, the kind that'll do anything for cash. One was already unloading chains and a generator. I shouted, "You know this is federal land, right? You're about to commit a federal crime." One of the men hesitated, looking at her. "Ma'am, this doesn't feel right." Karen snapped, "You'll get paid double if we finish before sunrise." That's when I decided to make a call of my own. I walked inside, opened my safe and pulled out a small radio marked with the same eagle insignia the ranger had worn earlier. I pressed the button and said, "Ranger Unit 47, this is leaseholder 22A. We've got unauthorized activity near cabin coordinates 44.9 north, 106.3 west. Likely the same suspects as last week." The reply came almost instantly. "Copy that, 22A, we're already tracking them, maintain distance." Outside, Karen shouted again, "We're cutting power now, don't say I didn't warn you." I stepped onto the porch, keeping my tone steady. "You're about to find out what federal surveillance looks like." And right as I said it, a helicopter beam cut through the snowstorm, sweeping over the trucks. The men froze, Karen turned white. And then a voice boomed from above, "Step away from the property, federal law enforcement, hands where we can see them." The wind whipped snow into their faces as they scattered, shouting. Karen ducked behind her truck, screaming, "You can't do this, this is my land." But the look on her face when that helicopter spotlight locked on her. That was the moment she realized she wasn't fighting a homeowner anymore. She was fighting the United States government. The snow whipped across the clearing as the helicopter hovered overhead, its floodlight painting everything in a harsh white glare. Karen tried to run, slipping in the snow, yelling into the wind, "You have no right, this is harassment." Federal agents in dark jackets moved in fast, 2 from the helicopter, more from black SUVs crawling up the trail. The sound of boots crunching in the ice mixed with the stutter of the rotors. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching it all unfold. One of the agents shouted, "Ma'am, stop moving, hands where we can see them." Karen stumbled to her knees, still clutching that same clipboard half buried in snow. "I'm the HOA president, you can't arrest me," she cried. The lead ranger approached her slowly, pulling out a tablet. "You filed 3 fraudulent land ownership claims in the last week, falsified county permits and led civilians onto restricted property. You're under arrest for federal trespass and attempted land seizure." Her jaw dropped. "Land seizure, you can't be serious." The ranger tilted his head. "Ma'am, that's literally what you wrote on this form." He held up a document wrapped in plastic, the same claim she'd tried to file. Karen looked around, desperate. "He set me up, he planned this," she screamed, pointing at me. I just sighed. "Karen, I didn't plan anything, you just never listened when someone told you to stop." The agents moved in, cuffing her gently but firmly. One of her workers tried to step forward, but another agent warned, "Don't, you'll make it worse." They backed away fast. Karen's voice cracked as they pulled her to her feet. "This isn't over, I'll sue every one of you." The ranger gave her a calm look. "Ma'am, you'll have plenty of time to think about that on the ride to Denver." The snowstorm finally eased, leaving only the low hum of engines and the soft creak of branches. As they loaded her into the SUV, one agent walked up to me. "You handled this the right way," he said. "We've been watching her for a while, fake HOA expansions, extortion threats, even forged signatures." I nodded. "She picked the wrong land to mess with." He smiled faintly. "You're lucky this lease exists. Most folks don't realize these old forest rights are still valid." When the last vehicle disappeared into the woods, the silence returned, deep, clean, peaceful. I went back inside, stoked the fire, and finally sat down. For the first time in weeks, it felt like the mountain could breathe again. But as I looked out the window, I noticed something strange in the snow by the tree line. A small metal box, half buried, blinking faintly red. I stepped closer, squinting through the glass. It wasn't mine. And suddenly I realized maybe Karen hadn't been working alone. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the cold, my boots sinking into the snow with a soft crunch. The red light blinked faster as I got closer, like it was warning me. The metal box was small, about the size of a lunch tin, with wires running underneath and a faint hum that made the hairs on my neck stand up. I crouched down, brushing off the snow. It wasn't a bomb, at least not the kind that explodes. A small sticker on the side said HOA Enforcement Surveillance Property Division. I stared at it, confused. She actually planted surveillance gear, I whispered. Right then, a voice behind me said, "Don't touch that." I spun around. The same ranger from before. Miller stood a few feet away, flashlight in one hand, radio in the other. He looked serious. "We found 2 more of those up the trail," he said. "Looks like someone's been trying to record federal property activity." "Karen?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not just her. There's an entire private enforcement firm backing her HOA. She was probably the face, they're the money." I frowned. "You're saying this was bigger than her?" "Yeah," Miller said quietly. "We've been tracking these groups. They pretend to be homeowners associations but operate like land reclamation rings. They find rural land with weak oversight, claim it, and force people off until they own it." The snow fell slower now, thick and silent. "So what happens next?" I asked. He bent down, lifted the device carefully into a bag and said, "Now we find who was feeding her orders." I followed him back toward the cabin, glancing over my shoulder at the dark forest. For the first time, I noticed faint tire tracks leading deeper into the woods, away from the main road. "Those weren't from her trucks," Miller muttered, noticing too. "Someone else was here tonight." Back inside, I shut the door and checked the window again. The forest looked empty, but the kind of empty that hides things. Miller radioed his team, telling them to sweep the area. Then he turned to me. "You said you've had odd noises around here at night." "Yeah," I said slowly. "Thought it was just wind or wildlife." He nodded grimly. "It was." The radio crackled suddenly. A voice came through. "Ranger Unit 3 here. We found another cabin 2 miles east, fresh footprints, power still running." Miller looked at me. Guess Karen wasn't the only one trying to claim this mountain. I stared at the fire, feeling that uneasy chill crawl up my back again. Then who the hell is out there now? He grabbed his rifle, zipped up his jacket and said, "Let's find out."